because we've identified issues with democracy, with deifying politicians, with cultism, and so on. I want to get into the issue now of the level of responsibility we should put on persons, whether they're in a cult, whether this is a democracy and they don't understand it, whether fascism is at work, whether politicians are gods and tells us what to do. Are we responsible? So let me start from the premise that Trump is a racist. And I know that there are pundits on talk radio, talk TV, that are hesitant to label him because they say they do not know what's in a man's heart. Now, a lot of us take a different view because we believe by their fruits you shall know them. And so we believe that you shall know the tree for sure. So if we see racist fruits, we would know that it's a racist tree. Let's look at Trump. The list of crimes are unending. He openly supports white supremacist conduct and ideology, tweets and retweets it, then deletes the tweets when he's called out for that. He has hired and retained a white supremacist in the White House, even despite clear, convincing evidence in that white supremacist's own writing that he believes and holds these ideologies. In fact, Trump's campaign started with the reimagined white supremacy called the alt-right. We all know about Charlottesville and the good people on both sides thing and the refusal to condemn Nazism and violence that they perpetrate. We know about the open contempt for Black women, for Black and brown journalists, for Black and brown professionals, for women generally, but in particular, the blatant disrespect for Black and brown women and journalists and Congress women also. We know about the demonizing of whole ethnicities across the world and whole countries, particularly those with a predominantly Black and or brown skin color, and the crimes go on even before he was president. Now, Oprah recently became famous, Jen, for saying, if you turn a blind eye to racism, you become an accomplice to it. So she voted for Trump. Is she racist? Can you comment on the accomplice theory and give us your perspective?
Well, first of all, Trump is clearly racist. And for any journalist or reporter to say that they don't know what's in his heart, they're just being cowards. They know. They are just afraid of the blowback that they might get. And they, there's this whole thing about appearing fair and balanced, which is BS. Really, we should be striving for objectivity. And if you're being objective and you look at Trump, he is a racist. Now, for the people who voted for him, I think really to put it simply, they're not all necessarily racist or don't think of themselves as racist. Now, if they vote for him, I would consider them racist. But in 2016, their priorities may be different. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I know how I voted. I didn't vote for him. But they may be thinking, oh, okay, he's going to bring back jobs. He's whatever. He's going to make America great again in that way. And then, so their priorities weren't racism. And the press has a lot to do. I think a lot of fault goes to them because they didn't really emphasize it. They almost just sort of like let him take over. He got like billions of dollars of free press because he was so entertaining and so outrageous. He'd call in sometimes to any of these, CBS, ABC, and just blather on, and like Les Moonves from CBS said, Trump's not good for our country, but he's damn good for the wallet. So they didn't really emphasize that. They all kind of just blew over it because, first of all, they didn't take him seriously at first. And then they just they also, there's this fear of being like, they have to be fair and balanced. That's what they think. And then, and they don't want to say anything. They don't want to take a position. And then they just didn't bring it up enough. So I don't think that people who voted for him were necessarily racist. I do think they were bamboozled. You know, and maybe, sure, there's some that are like, you know, the white supremacists that are like, oh yeah, I'm picking up all the signals. This guy, he's speaking my language. Yes, he's racist, right on. I think for other people, they're thinking like, oh, I lost my job. You know, the coal mines, they're not working anymore. Mine got outsourced, and he's promising all this stuff and perfect health care. And so they're just thinking like, well, they either don't know about that part of him, you know, because the press fell down on the job in that way, or they didn't think about it. It wasn't like in the forefront of their mind. So I think it's like you and I were saying, like with people, there's black and there's white. And Trump is definitely an evil, racist person. But then there's that nuance of people that are gray, that are like, you know, that maybe by now they realize, oh, wow, he really is racist. Also, a lot of people weren't even aware of the inequality and the way the police were handling people of color until they saw George Floyd killed by the police. And then it's kind of like they woke up, like, holy cow, this is going on. Wow, you know? And then that's when we had the beautiful thing with people, all diverse people, different races and ages, like out in the streets night after night after night. The most beautiful, beautiful thing. It makes me emotional to think about it. But, you know, people's lives were busy. COVID made us slow down a little. People were watching the news. People had time to go out in the street and realize. So now I think people, I won't say that they're necessarily racist if they vote for Trump. I will say that they're brainwashed by Fox News, and maybe they don't like the racist part, but if they think like he's doing the right thing, because if you watch Fox News or listen to Rush Limbaugh, this guy can walk on water. They'll turn whatever he does that's horrible, they'll turn it around inside out, upside down, and make it so that it looks beautiful, like he did this great thing.
Yeah,
right?
Jen, but based on what you said at the start, I think what I'm taking away from you is 2016, you can see nuance to the choices that are made, but you are saying in accordance or in line with what Oprah has said now is, it's plain as day, we've had time to stop and look and we're seeing the truth. So I'm taking it that you would buy into the accomplice theory in 2020, but Mary, let me hear from you. You had something to contribute. I think you're still on mute. Let's try to unmute.
In the meantime, I'll just say, yeah, you'd be more likely, but not necessarily again.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what happened? Because my father, who is an extraordinarily, well, he was an extraordinarily intelligent, compassionate person who acted out his belief in Catholicism to embrace humanity, voted for Trump. And I remember when I just assumed he would not vote for Trump. And the day he told me that, I was just flabbergasted. But what he said was, he's going to shake things up. So I think he was talking about business, from the business perspective. But the other thing I wanted to say goes back to this idea of the cult. I am fascinated with that idea because I think it's also absolutely true. And I recognize that people who follow Trump, they must have a tremendous sense of security because everything he says is right. So all you have to do is just listen to him. And, you know, maybe that's part of the cult thing, is that, you know, that real sense of solidarity and security.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, yeah.
that's what I thought.
So yeah, along those lines, that's why I would say, Jermaine, that you could still possibly vote for Trump and not necessarily be racist, like think, well, I don't like the racism thing, but hey, he's just doing everything else right. You know, the economy would be great if it weren't for that COVID and the Democrats. So yeah, there's nuance, you know?
Samuel, did you want to jump in?
I had a quick comment question. You say that you didn't think that people didn't necessarily know he was racist at the beginning, and now they do. But I had a clear understanding of who he was before that first election. He presented himself as a hater of many people and really fed off of that and got his minions to feed off of that. My issue, and I've often said this to Trump supporters, is how could you morally put a rapist into office who wants to take so many people who have built this country and made this country what it was and throw them out and exclude them? When we did the same thing to make this country, it seemed so uneducated and but I just am kind of blown because I don't feel like I knew he was, I knew who he was. I knew he was a rapist. I knew he was a racist, and people still voted for him, and that was pretty clear up front. So I respectfully disagree with that people didn't know who he was. I think he was the easy choice for people who were nervous that change had started to happen and they might get left behind. And I think I'm from the Midwest, and that's the mentality of the Midwest. So I think that's who he appealed to, and he knew who he was going after.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I would agree with that. I just, you know, the press didn't play up the racist thing. I mean, definitely he just seemed like an all-around mean person. And I'm from New York, so I remember those days when he was hanging around. You know, we'd go to Studio 54 and it'd be like, oh, there's that asshole, Donald Trump. You know, and I think it was obvious he was a mean person. So I couldn't understand why somebody would vote for him, and it appalled me when a friend of mine did. But I tried to get inside their head, not to excuse, but I think the more we can understand why they are the way they are. See, you have to understand the power of right-wing media and what that does. You know, it's like Philip was mentioning Rwanda. The Hutus and the Tutsis sometimes they were family, they were friends, they were neighbors. But because the government used this radio show to smear the Tutsis, the Hutus rose up and over 800,000 people were slaughtered. And a lot of times the people going around were holding a radio and a machete, a radio in one hand, a machete in the other. Goebbels bought and made cheap radios available for all the German people so that they could only be fed Nazi propaganda. And yeah, sure, he added some orchestra music and some nice things in there, but to be sure, it was propaganda day in and day out. And I'm sorry to say this about our species, but we are what we eat, and media is more powerful than we like to think it is, and we are weaker. Many of us are weaker. We're not taught individual thinking.
You're making us, or making me feel like America, or at least 38% for sure, or maybe 53% of white women voted for Trump. Maybe about 58 to 60% of the white people as a group, social group, voted for him. And I'm beginning to wonder what ratio of those are the zombies in the cult that we're hearing about. But Susan, you wanted to make, and then Lynn, you wanted to make a contribution. Please go ahead.
Okay. I think the other issue, I agree with everything that's being said. I think there's another issue that this country, and maybe in other places too, is very divided on individual issues. And I know people who are friends of mine who voted for Trump because of one issue. They're a single issue voter. And on the other side too, people who would not vote for Trump because of an issue and had nothing to do. And I just read a big article in New York Times about the evangelistic folks and how they can separate all the things that they could not stand in a person if it was anybody else, but they want they want conservatives on the Supreme Court, they want no abortion, etc.
Right.
You know, a few things, and that's it. He's going to give it to him, and the other side isn't, and that's that.
Right.
And so some of them I know some of my friends, I don't really feel that they are racist, but they're so focused.
Right. Got to get that conservative on the Supreme Court.
Lynn, did you want to say something? You're on mute. Let me try to unmute.
Give me, thank you. I agree with some of the things Susan said and some of the things Dan said. But I really take issue going back to 2016 that people didn't know. As Dan said, we all knew, okay? Anyone who voted for him, they didn't care. And this topic here is racism, right? So let's get back to that and stop tiptoeing around it about one issue that was important to someone and whatever. The main focus, everything that he does, boils down to racism. The children who are locked up in cages, and Obama is not innocent of that either. But the point is that I can't believe, Jen, that people don't have free will. I think that people know that he's racist and they don't care. And either it's because they gleefully know and identify as racist with him, or it just doesn't matter to them. And some of them are voting against their own interests. And whoops.
No, go ahead.
That's what I meant about it's not their priority. And I didn't mean to say that nobody knew. I just meant that there were other topics that were being talked about and that wasn't emphasized at all. But yeah, no.
If you talk about priorities, though, everything boils down to that because, you know, institutionally, when we're talking about this election in this country, that everything is stemming and built on white supremacy, there can't be other things that people are prioritizing and having an excuse for that.
Very, very interesting, Lynn. So